The transport shuttle hummed as it approached the massive space station floating in the darkness. Jake Morrison pressed his face against the window and watched the structure grow larger. Sentinel-9 was unlike anything he had ever seen back on Earth. The station stretched for miles in every direction, with docking bays that could swallow entire cities. His stomach churned with nervous energy. 3 months ago, Jake had been working at an auto repair shop in Nevada, living a simple life fixing engines and spending weekends camping in the desert. Then the recruitment officers arrived, looking for humans willing to join the Galactic Defense Academy. Earth was still new to the alliance of alien species, and they needed representatives who could prove humanity belonged among the stars. Jake hadn't expected to be selected. He was 23 years old, had never finished college, and his only real skills came from growing up poor and learning to fix or build whatever he needed. But apparently, that was exactly what they wanted. Someone practical. Someone who could adapt. The shuttle docked with a metallic clang that echoed through the small cabin. Jake grabbed his single bag and followed the other passengers out into the station. The air smelled different here, processed and clean in a way that felt artificial. The gravity felt slightly lighter than Earth's, making each step feel bouncy and strange. A tall figure waited at the arrival gate. Jake's eyes widened as he took in the creature before him. The alien stood nearly 8 feet tall with dark blue skin that looked like polished stone. 4 arms hung at its sides, each ending in 3 thick fingers. Its face was flat with 2 large eyes that gleamed like black pearls. This was a Krenth, one of the warrior species that formed the backbone of the Alliance military. "Human recruit?" The voice rumbled like distant thunder. "Yes, sir. Jake Morrison reporting for training." Jake tried to keep his voice steady. The Krenth nodded, a gesture that seemed universal across species. "Follow me. Orientation begins in 1 hour. I am Instructor Velthar." They walked through corridors that stretched impossibly long. Jake saw dozens of different aliens moving about their business. Some walked on 2 legs like him, others on 4 or 6. Some floated using methods he couldn't understand. A few looked almost human, while others defied description. The galaxy was far stranger than any movie had prepared him for. The training facility occupied an entire section of the station. Velthar led Jake to a large assembly hall where other recruits were gathering. Jake counted about 30 beings representing at least a dozen different species. He immediately felt small and out of place. A Krenth recruit stood in one corner, even taller than the instructor. Its muscles rippled under blue skin as it performed some kind of stretching exercise. Near the front, a creature with 6 thin arms and a head covered in sensory stalks worked on a holographic display with dizzying speed. In the center of the room, a being made entirely of what looked like living crystal hummed softly, creating harmonious sounds that made Jake's teeth vibrate. Another human sat alone near the back. Jake felt a wave of relief and headed over. The man looked a few years older, with brown hair and tired eyes. "Hey, I'm Jake," he offered his hand. The other human shook it firmly. "Danny White, you just arrived?" "About 10 minutes ago. This place is incredible." Danny laughed without humor. "Incredible and terrifying. I've been here 3 days already. Most of these aliens have been training since they were kids for this kind of thing. Their whole cultures are built around combat or exploration or technology. We're just humans who answered an ad." Before Jake could respond, Instructor Velthar stepped onto a raised platform at the front of the hall. The room fell silent instantly. "Welcome to the Galactic Defense Academy." Velthar's voice carried easily across the space. "You represent the finest candidates from your respective species. You are here because your worlds believe you have the potential to become elite defenders of the Alliance." The instructor's black eyes swept across the gathered recruits. "The Devourers push deeper into our territory each cycle. They destroy worlds, consume resources, and leave nothing but death behind them. We are the line that holds against the darkness. We are the shield that protects the innocent. Jake felt a chill run down his spine. The Devourers were the reason Earth had joined the Alliance so quickly. Better to have allies when something that dangerous lurked in the galaxy. Training will be difficult, Velthar continued. Many of you will fail. Some of you will quit. That is acceptable. Better to discover your limitations here than in actual combat where failure means death for you and your squad. The instructor outlined the program structure. Physical conditioning, weapons training, tactical studies, survival exercises, and countless simulations. The washout rate was 60%. Those who graduated would serve minimum terms of 5 years on the front lines. You come from different worlds with different strengths, Velthar said. The Krenth bring power and endurance. The Vexil offer technical expertise and coordination. The Shards provide tactical analysis and communication. Each species contributes something unique to the Alliance. The instructor's gaze found Jake and Danny. Humans are our newest members. Your species has much to prove. Many in the Alliance question whether you belong here at all. You will have opportunities to answer those questions with your actions. Jake felt the weight of dozens of alien eyes turning toward him. Some looked curious, others skeptical, a few openly dismissive. He understood the challenge clearly. Earth was the new kid, and everyone wanted to see if humans could keep up. The orientation lasted another hour, covering station rules, safety protocols, and administrative details. When it finally ended, Jake found his assigned quarters, a small room with a bed, desk, and storage locker. It was basic but functional. He lay on the bed and stared at the ceiling. Tomorrow, the real training would begin. He would be tested against beings who were stronger, faster, and more experienced. His stomach twisted with doubt. But Jake had survived worse. Growing up with nothing had taught him to adapt, to find solutions where others saw only problems. Maybe that would be enough. Maybe being human meant something more than the aliens realized. He closed his eyes and tried to sleep, knowing that everything would change in the morning. 2 weeks had passed since Jake arrived at the academy, and every muscle in his body ached. The training was brutal in ways he hadn't imagined. The Krenth could lift weights that would crush him. The Vexil could operate 6 different control panels simultaneously, while Jake struggled with one. Even the exercises designed to be species neutral left him exhausted. He finished in the middle of most rankings. Not the worst, but definitely not impressive. Danny had already quit after 5 days, unable to handle the pressure and physical demands. Jake was now the only human in his training group, which made him feel even more isolated. The other recruits had stopped being openly hostile, but they weren't exactly friendly either. They treated him with polite indifference, the way someone might treat a mascot or a novelty. Jake ate meals alone and spent his free time studying alien combat techniques, trying to find any edge he could. On the 15th day, Instructor Velthar made an announcement that changed everything. Today you will face the improvisation challenge, the Krenth said, standing before the assembled recruits in the main training hall. This exercise tests your ability to adapt under pressure. Combat rarely goes according to plan. Equipment fails, supply lines break, you find yourself alone with nothing but wreckage and debris. Velthar gestured to a series of sealed doors along one wall. Behind each door is a chamber filled with random materials, broken furniture, discarded electronics, chemical containers, and various other items. Your task is simple. You have 1 standard hour to create a functional weapon using only what you find inside. Murmurs rippled through the group. Some recruits looked excited, others nervous. Jake felt his heart rate increase. This was different from the physical tests where his human limitations held him back. You will be judged on creativity, functionality, and efficiency, Velthar continued. We expect 1 weapon. 1 solid, working weapon that could be used in actual combat. Quality matters more than quantity. You will enter one at a time, and instructors will observe from a monitoring room. The Krenth recruit, Corvin, volunteered to go first. The massive alien disappeared behind one of the doors. On a large screen above, everyone could watch from cameras inside the chamber. Corvin moved slowly but deliberately, examining the materials carefully. After 30 minutes, the alien began assembling pieces of a broken metal shelving unit. By the 53rd minute, Corvin emerged holding a heavy club made from a pipe with jagged edges welded to the striking surface. It was crude but undeniably effective. Velthar nodded approvingly. Functional. Good use of available materials. Next came Rixel, the Vexil with 6 arms. The insectoid alien worked much faster, multiple limbs moving independently to sort through components. Rixel created a spring-loaded launcher that could fire small projectiles at high speed. The construction took 48 minutes, and the weapon performed well in a brief demonstration. "Excellent craftsmanship," Velthar commented. Harmonic 7, the Shard collective being, entered third. The crystalline creature approached the challenge differently, focusing on electronics and power sources. After 55 minutes, Harmonic 7 produced a device capable of generating electrical discharges strong enough to incapacitate most species. The demonstration left scorch marks on the test dummy. "Innovative thinking," Velthar praised. One by one, recruits entered and emerged with their creations. A poisoned spear, a chemical spray weapon, a weighted net launcher. Each weapon reflected the particular strengths and thinking patterns of its creator. Most recruits used between 45 and 58 minutes. All produced competent results that earned nods from the instructors. Finally, Velthar called Jake's name. The human stood and walked to the door, feeling the weight of every alien eye on his back. The door hissed open, and Jake stepped into a room about 30 feet square. The lighting was dim but adequate, and everywhere he looked, he saw possibility. Broken chairs and tables were stacked against one wall. A pile of electrical components and wiring filled one corner. Chemical cleaning supplies lined a shelf, many with warning labels he couldn't read. Lengths of cable and rope hung from hooks. Fabric scraps, possibly from old uniforms, lay in a bin. Metal pipes of various sizes leaned against another wall. There were plastic containers, glass bottles, rubber tubing, and dozens of smaller items scattered across the floor. The timer on the wall began counting down from 60 minutes. Jake didn't panic. Instead, he felt something like coming home. This was familiar territory. How many times had he needed to fix something with whatever was lying around the garage? How many camping trips had required improvised repairs? How many lazy afternoons had he spent watching survival shows and thinking, I could do that? He started moving, picking up items and testing their weight. His mind raced through possibilities. A pipe could be a club, but it could also be a blowgun with the right modifications. The chemicals were dangerous on their own, but mixing certain types could create reactions. The cables could strangle, trip, or be used as springs. Everything was a potential weapon if you looked at it correctly. Jake's hands began working almost automatically. He grabbed a heavy pipe and a length of cable, wrapping one end to create a weighted flail. That took 3 minutes. He set it aside and reached for fabric strips and some sharp metal fragments. 5 minutes later, he had a basic sling that could hurl projectiles with surprising force. The chemical containers caught his attention. Jake carefully mixed small amounts from 2 different bottles into a sealed container, creating something that would produce noxious fumes when opened. He added a simple fuse mechanism. Another weapon complete. Time seemed to disappear as Jake moved through the room. His mind entered a state of flow, seeing connections and possibilities everywhere. A glass bottle became a Molotov cocktail. Electrical wiring and batteries became a crude taser. A chair leg with fabric wrapped around it became a torch. Rope and a noose created a snare trap. He didn't think about the instructors watching. He didn't worry about impressing anyone. Jake simply did what felt natural, turning garbage into tools, trash into weapons, nothing into something useful. The materials sorted themselves into categories in his mind. Blunt weapons here, cutting weapons there, ranged weapons in another pile, chemical weapons carefully separated, traps and tricks in the corner. Each item got labeled with a quick description written on scraps of fabric. Jake's hands moved faster as ideas built upon ideas. A crossbow made from broken furniture and elastic cable, a spear with a detachable head for throwing, multiple variations of clubs and bludgeons, cutting tools of different sizes, chemical irritants and smoke bombs, even psychological weapons, items designed to confuse or frighten rather than harm directly. When the timer buzzed to signal the end of the hour, Jake stepped back and looked at what he had created. 47 weapons lay organized before him in neat rows. In the observation room, absolute silence had fallen over the instructors and senior cadets who had gathered to watch the humans' attempt. What had started as casual curiosity had transformed into something approaching disbelief. Instructor Velthar stood closest to the main screen, all 4 arms crossed over the massive chest. The Krenth's dark eyes tracked every movement Jake made inside the chamber. Behind Velthar, 3 other instructors from different species watched with growing fascination. "Replay the first 10 minutes, Velthar commanded. A technician rewound the footage. They watched as Jake entered the room and spent the initial 5 minutes simply looking around, picking up objects, testing weights and properties. Nothing unusual yet. Then the human's behavior changed dramatically. "There," said Dr. Kethrin, the Academy's xenopsychology specialist. The Vexel instructor pointed with 2 of her 6 arms. "Notice how his movement pattern shifts. He stops thinking and starts doing. Watch his eyes. He is seeing something we are not." The footage showed Jake beginning to assemble weapons with practiced efficiency. His hands moved quickly but not frantically. Each motion had purpose. He would grab materials, manipulate them briefly, set the completed weapon aside, and immediately move to the next project. There was no hesitation, no wasted effort. At the 15-minute mark, he has completed 7 functional weapons, Velthar noted. Most recruits are still examining materials at this point. They continued watching. The count climbed steadily. 10 weapons, 15, 20. Jake showed no signs of slowing down or running out of ideas. If anything, he seemed to be gaining momentum. "This is not normal behavior," commented Instructor Zareth, a shard collective being whose crystalline form pulsed with different colors as it processed what it was seeing. The task requested 1 weapon. Why does he continue? "Perhaps he misunderstood the assignment," suggested another instructor. Dr. Kethrin shook her head, her sensory stalks waving thoughtfully. "No, observe his organization. He is categorizing as he works. See how he groups similar weapon types together? He understands exactly what he is doing." By the 30-minute mark, Jake had created 23 weapons. Word had spread through the academy, and more observers crowded into the monitoring room. Recruits who had already completed the challenge pushed against the windows, trying to see the screens clearly. Corvin, the Krenth recruit, rumbled in confusion. "How is this possible? The materials are limited. Where does he find the components for so many designs?" "He is reusing concepts," Rixel, the Vexel recruit, observed. "See there? He makes 3 different clubs from similar materials, but each has a different weight distribution and purpose. 1 for crushing, 1 for piercing, 1 for throwing. He is not creating random weapons. He is building an arsenal with tactical variety." The timer showed 45 minutes elapsed. Jake's count reached 39 weapons. The human moved through the chamber like he was shopping in a familiar store, knowing exactly where everything was and what it could become. A broken chair became 3 separate weapons. A single pipe was modified into 2 different tools. The chemical containers were mixed and combined in ways that made the station's safety officer nervous. "Should we stop this?" someone asked. "Some of those chemical combinations could be dangerous." "He is controlling the reactions carefully," Dr. Catherine said. "Look at how he seals each container and marks them with warnings. He knows what he is doing." At 50 minutes, the count reached 43. The observation room had gone completely quiet again. This was beyond impressive. This was something else entirely. Jake wasn't just completing the assignment. He was demonstrating a capability that none of them had anticipated. Velthar's deep voice broke the silence. "In my 300 years of training recruits, I have never seen anything like this." The final 10 minutes seemed to pass in slow motion. Jake added a makeshift crossbow with multiple projectiles, a garrote made from cable, 2 different trap designs that could be assembled quickly, a smoke generator using chemical reactions, and finally, a weighted throwing weapon that could double as a climbing tool. When the timer reached 0 and buzzed loudly, Jake stepped back from his work. He looked tired but satisfied. Before him, organized in careful rows and labeled with descriptions, sat 47 distinct weapons. The human had created 47 weapons in the time it took most recruits to make one. The chamber door opened, and Jake walked out into the training hall. He expected to see the next recruit preparing to enter, or perhaps Instructor Velthar ready to review his performance. Instead, he found himself facing a crowd of aliens, all staring at him with expressions he couldn't quite read. The silence stretched uncomfortably. Jake shifted his weight nervously. Had he done something wrong? Had he broken some rule he didn't know about? I'm done," Jake said, his voice sounding small in the large space. "The weapons are organized by type. I labeled everything." Velthar stepped forward, towering over the human. The Krenth's face was unreadable. "How many weapons did you create?" 47, sir. I would have made more, but I ran out of time and materials." A strange sound rippled through the crowd. It took Jake a moment to realize some of the aliens were laughing, though it sounded nothing like human laughter. "You ran out of time," Velthar repeated slowly, as if testing the words. "You ran out of time making 47 weapons when the assignment asked for one." Jake's stomach dropped. He had misunderstood. They wanted just one weapon, and he had gotten carried away. His face flushed with embarrassment. "I'm sorry, sir. I can go back in and pick the best one if you want. I just thought that in a real survival situation, you'd want options and backup plans, so I kept going. I wasn't trying to show off or anything." Dr. Catherine moved closer, her multiple eyes studying Jake with intense curiosity. "You were not showing off? This is normal for you?" "Well, yeah. I mean, once you start seeing what you can make from the stuff in there, it's hard to stop. Everything could be used for something. It seemed wasteful to only make one thing when there was so much potential." Velthar and Dr. Catherine exchanged a long look. Something passed between them, some understanding that Jake couldn't follow. "Come with us, Recruit Morrison," Velthar said. "We need to have a conversation about exactly what your species brings to this alliance." Jake followed the instructors toward the briefing rooms, aware of dozens of alien eyes tracking his movement. Behind him, he heard the recruits beginning to talk excitedly in languages he didn't understand. Whatever he had done, it had definitely gotten their attention. He just hoped it was the good kind of attention. The briefing room was larger than Jake expected, with a curved table that could accommodate many different body types and sizes. All of the Academy's senior instructors had assembled, representing nearly a dozen species. Jake sat in a chair designed for beings much larger than himself, feeling like a child called to the principal's office. Instructor Velthar stood at the head of the table, while Dr. Catherine activated a holographic display showing footage from Jake's improvisation test. The other instructors watched in silence as the recording played at high speed, showing the rapid creation of weapon after weapon. "Recruit Morrison," Velthar began, his voice rumbling with barely contained curiosity. "We need you to explain your thinking during that exercise. Walk us through your mental process." Jake shifted uncomfortably. "I'm not sure what you want me to say, sir. I just did what seemed natural." "Natural," Dr. Catherine repeated, her sensory stalks quivering with interest. Please elaborate. What feels natural about creating 47 weapons in 60 minutes? Jake thought about how to explain something that felt as instinctive as breathing. Well, when I walked into that room, I didn't see trash and broken stuff. I saw possibilities. That's just how humans think, I guess. We've always had to. He gestured to the frozen image on the display. Look at that pipe. It's not just a pipe. It's a club, a lever, a tent pole, a blowgun, a reaching tool, part of a raft. Depending on what you need, it becomes different things. Humans learned to think that way because we had to survive. One of the instructors, a being covered in thick scales, spoke up. But your species achieved spaceflight. You have advanced technology. Why would you still think like primitive survivors? Because we've only had that technology for a tiny part of our history, Jake explained. Humans spent hundreds of thousands of years being pretty weak compared to other animals on Earth. We weren't the strongest or the fastest. We didn't have claws or armor or venom. What we had was our brains and our hands. He held up his hands as if seeing them for the first time. We learned to make tools from anything. Rocks became hammers and knives. Sticks became spears and fire starters. Animal bones became needles and fish hooks. We took the world apart and put it back together in ways that helped us survive. Dr. Catherine's mandibles clicked thoughtfully. So this improvisation ability is deeply embedded in human psychology? It is not special training? I mean, I learned some stuff growing up, Jake said. My dad taught me how to fix cars with whatever parts we could find because we were too poor to buy new ones. I took shop class in high school where we built things from scrap. I watched a lot of survival shows on TV, but honestly, most humans can do this kind of thing if they need to. The briefing room erupted in multilingual discussion. Instructors turned to each other, speaking rapidly in their native languages. Jake caught fragments of translations from the universal translator embedded in his ear. Velthar raised a hand, and silence fell immediately. You say most humans have this ability. How common is it? Jake considered the question. Pretty common, I'd say. I'm not special or anything. Back home, we have entire TV channels dedicated to people building stuff, fixing stuff, or surviving in the wilderness with minimal gear. There are competitions where humans try to escape from locked rooms by solving puzzles and improvising tools. Kids play games where they build forts and weapons from whatever's around. He paused, remembering. And in our history, improvisation saved lives constantly. Soldiers in wars made weapons from farm equipment when they ran out of ammunition. Prisoners made tools to escape using just bed sheets and spoons. People survived disasters by building shelters from wreckage. It's so common that we barely think about it. Dr. Catherine pulled up additional displays showing human history files. Images flickered across the screens. Crude stone tools, medieval siege weapons, improvised explosives from various conflicts, survival shelters, homemade vehicles, and countless other examples of human creativity born from necessity. This is remarkable, the Vexel instructor said softly. Most species evolved as either dominant predators or developed advanced technology relatively early. We did not spend millennia in sustained vulnerability, requiring constant improvisation. Instructor Zareth, the Shard Collective, added their perspective. The Shards achieved computational thinking and energy manipulation while still in our crystalline formation stage. We never experienced true physical vulnerability. The concept of seeing everything as a potential weapon or tool is foreign to our psychology. The Krenth were apex predators on our world, Velthar admitted. We had strength and size as natural advantages. When we developed intelligence, we already dominated our environment. We did not need to improvise because we could simply overpower obstacles. Jake began to understand what they were getting at. Each species had their own evolutionary path, their own way of developing intelligence and technology. Humans were unique, not because they were smarter or stronger, but because they had spent so long being smart enough to survive while being too weak to dominate. So what you're saying, Jake ventured, is that other species didn't need to learn this kind of desperate creativity because they weren't desperate? Precisely, Dr. Catherine confirmed. Your species developed tool-making and improvisation as survival necessities. These skills became so fundamental that they integrated into your cultural DNA. Even now, with advanced technology, you still think like survivors who must adapt to any situation. An instructor Jake didn't recognize spoke up, their translation coming through clearly. Is this capability universal among humans, or limited to certain individuals? Jake shrugged. I think most humans can do it to some degree. Some are better than others, sure. But we all grow up learning that things can be repurposed, that problems have multiple solutions, that you make do with what you have. It's part of how we teach our kids. The briefing room fell quiet as the implications sank in. Finally, Velthar spoke again, his voice carrying a weight that made Jake sit up straighter. Recruit Morrison, what you have demonstrated today changes our understanding of human capabilities. We invited Earth into the Alliance partly out of diplomatic necessity and partly to evaluate your potential as allies. We expected humans to be adequate soldiers, perhaps bringing enthusiasm and determination. The Krenth instructor's black eyes locked onto Jake's face. We did not expect this. We did not anticipate that your species might possess skills we lack, skills that could prove invaluable in the fight against the Devourers. Dr. Catherine expanded the holographic display to show battle reports and casualty statistics. Many of our soldiers die when equipment fails or supply lines are cut. They are trained to use specific weapons and tools, but when those are gone, they struggle to adapt. Your improvisation ability could address this critical vulnerability. Jake felt the weight of their expectations settling on his shoulders. He was just one person, one ordinary human who happened to be good at making things from junk. But in their eyes, he represented something larger. He represented humanity's potential contribution to the war effort. So what happens now? Jake asked quietly. Velthar's expression might have been a smile, though it was hard to tell on a Krenth face. Now, Recruit Morrison, we redesign our training program, and you are going to help us teach the entire academy how to think like a human. 3 days after the improvisation test, Jake found himself standing in front of a classroom filled with alien recruits. His hands were sweating, and his heart pounded in his chest. Public speaking had never been his strength, and speaking to dozens of beings from species he barely understood was terrifying. Go ahead, Morrison, Instructor Velthar encouraged from the back of the room. Show them what you showed us. Jake took a deep breath and gestured to the pile of random objects on the table before him. The Academy had assembled a collection of common items: broken furniture pieces, electronic components, fabric scraps, containers, and various other materials. Nothing special, just everyday junk. Okay, so the thing about improvisation is that you have to stop seeing objects for what they were made to be, Jake began, his voice steadier than he felt. You have to start seeing them for what they could become. He picked up a length of metal pipe. This was probably part of a water system. That was its purpose. But purposes can change. Watch. Jake grabbed a piece of fabric and wrapped it tightly around one end of the pipe, securing it with wire. Now it's a torch. Add some flammable material and you have light and fire. He unwrapped it and demonstrated how the pipe could be held as a club, used as a lever, or even modified into a basic blowgun by clearing the interior. The recruits watched with varying degrees of interest and skepticism. Corven, the Krenth, rumbled a question. But we have flashlights and proper weapons. Why make inferior versions? Because what happens when your flashlight breaks? Jake countered. Or when you lose your weapon? Or when you're stranded somewhere with nothing but wreckage? You adapt, or you die. He moved through several more demonstrations, showing how seemingly useless items could be transformed. A broken chair became the frame for a shelter or a weapon rack. Electronic wiring could conduct electricity, bind objects, or create simple circuits. Chemical cleaning supplies could be mixed to create various reactions, though Jake was careful to warn about the dangers involved. Rixel, the Vexel, raised a question using 2 of their 6 hands. Your mind works very quickly through these possibilities. How do we learn to think at that speed? Practice, Jake admitted. But also, you have to change your mindset. Stop looking for the perfect solution and start looking for any solution. Humans have a saying, necessity is the mother of invention. When you really need something, your brain gets creative. Over the following weeks, Jake's informal workshops became official parts of the curriculum. What started as demonstration sessions evolved into hands-on training exercises. Jake would dump random materials in front of groups and challenge them to create specific items: a shelter, a weapon, a communication device, a water filter. The results were initially frustrating. Most recruits struggled to break free from their ingrained thinking patterns. The Krenth wanted to use brute force. The Vexels searched for technical solutions. The Shards tried to calculate optimal approaches. They were all smart, but they were thinking within boxes. Jake realized he needed to adjust his teaching approach for each species. He started working with Corvin individually, showing the Krenth how superior strength could turn almost anything into a devastating weapon if used creatively. You don't need to find the perfect materials, Jake explained, handing Corvin a thin plastic rod. You just need to understand leverage and force. That flimsy rod becomes deadly if you know where to strike. With Rixel, Jake focused on combination thinking. You have 6 arms, which gives you advantages I'll never have. You can assemble complex devices faster than any human. Stop limiting yourself to standard designs. Experiment with weird configurations. The Vexel's multiple eyes lit up with understanding. Soon Rixel was creating improvised tools that incorporated functions Jake had never considered, taking advantage of their unique physiology. For the Shards, Jake emphasized practical application over theoretical perfection. Sometimes good enough is better than optimal if good enough saves your life right now. Don't get stuck calculating the best solution. Get stuck making a working solution. Slowly, incrementally, the recruits began to change. Their performance in improvisation exercises improved. More importantly, their overall approach to problems shifted. They started seeing multiple solutions instead of single paths. They became more adaptable. News of the training spread beyond the academy. Senior officers from various Alliance militaries visited to observe. Some were impressed, others skeptical. But the results spoke for themselves. Recruits who had completed Jake's workshops performed significantly better in survival scenarios and equipment failure simulations. 6 months into his training, Jake faced his final assessment. The test was brutal in its simplicity. Survive for 24 hours in a hostile environment simulator with 0 equipment. The environment would change randomly, throwing different challenges and threats at regular intervals. Automated defense systems would hunt him. He would have only what he could improvise from his surroundings. Jake entered the simulation arena with nothing but his uniform. The first environment was a ruined urban setting, filled with debris from collapsed buildings. Threats appeared within minutes, mobile defense drones with stunning weapons. He moved quickly, gathering materials. A broken piece of rebar became a pry bar and weapon. Fabric from abandoned furniture provided insulation and could be torn into strips for binding. He found a damaged vehicle and harvested components: mirrors for signaling and looking around corners, metal panels for shields, rubber for grip and traction. When the drones attacked, Jake was ready. He had created 3 separate hiding spots, several trap mechanisms, and multiple escape routes. He took out 2 drones using improvised slingshots firing metal fragments. The third he disabled with a crude electromagnetic pulse device assembled from vehicle electronics. The environment shifted to a desert wasteland. New challenges emerged. Jake built a solar still for water collection using plastic sheets and containers. He created shade structures from debris. When predatory creatures appeared in the simulation, he had already prepared defensive positions and deterrent devices. The simulation continued through the night. Forest environments, ice fields, toxic swamps, each with unique threats and challenges. Jake adapted to each one, creating the tools and shelters he needed to survive. He was exhausted, hungry, and pushed to his limits, but he made it through all 24 hours. When the simulation ended and Jake stumbled out of the arena, he found a crowd waiting. His entire training class stood there, along with instructors and senior officers. Velthar stepped forward with something that might have been pride on the Krenth's face. "Congratulations, Morrison. You have passed." "Did I do okay?" Jake asked, too tired to be modest. Dr. Kethrin's mandibles clicked in amusement. "You survived every scenario with minimal injuries, but more impressive is that 70% of your training class also passed their final assessments. Before your arrival, the historical pass rate for this particular test was 40%. Jake blinked in surprise. 70%? "Your teaching has had measurable impact," Velthar confirmed. "The other recruits learned from your methods. Not all can match your skill level, but all have improved significantly." The graduation ceremony took place 1 week later. Jake stood with his fellow recruits, all of whom now wore the insignia marking them as certified defenders of the Galactic Alliance. He caught Corvin's eye and received a nod of respect. Rixel waved 3 arms in greeting. Even Harmonic 7 hummed a frequency that the translator interpreted as congratulations. Velthar addressed the graduating class with his typical gravitas. "You came here as individuals from separate worlds. You leave as soldiers united in purpose. Each of you brings unique strengths to our alliance. Together, you are stronger than any one species alone." The Krenth instructor's gaze found Jake in the formation. "We have learned much from humanity in recent months. Your newest member species has taught us the value of adaptability and creative thinking. They have reminded us that sometimes the greatest strength lies not in power or technology, but in the refusal to give up, the determination to find a way forward no matter the circumstances." After the ceremony, as recruits celebrated and prepared for their assignments, Jake stood looking out a viewport at the stars. Somewhere out there, the Devourers threatened innocent worlds. Somewhere out there, war was being fought. A human voice interrupted his thoughts. "Pretty crazy, huh?" Jake turned to find another human recruit. A woman named Kate Rogers, who had arrived at the academy 3 months after him. She had been part of his improvisation workshops and had proven to be a natural at creative problem-solving. "Yeah," Jake agreed. 6 months ago, I was fixing cars in Nevada. Now I'm apparently the guy who taught aliens how to make weapons from garbage." Kate laughed. "There's a saying going around the barracks. The alien troops have a new motto. When you're down to nothing, call a human. They've already thought of 17 ways to turn nothing into something deadly." Jake couldn't help but smile at that. "Only 17? I must be slipping." They stood together in comfortable silence, 2 humans among thousands of aliens about to face dangers they could barely imagine. But Jake felt ready. He had proven that humanity belonged here, not through superior strength or advanced technology, but through sheer human stubbornness and creativity. The galaxy had accepted Earth into the Alliance as a diplomatic courtesy. Now they were beginning to understand what humans truly brought to the stars: the survival instincts of a species that had spent millennia refusing to quit, constantly adapting and turning every obstacle into an opportunity. Jake Morrison, former auto mechanic from Nevada, was heading to the front lines. and he was bringing humanity's greatest weapon with him, the absolute refusal to be defeated by circumstances, no matter how dire they became.